everyone, and welcome to a new episode of We Saw the Devil. This is Robin.
This is Jackie.
And tonight's episode is one of the worst, most heinous cases I have ever heard of in my entire life.
This is the level of graphic violence that even I cringe at. This is definitely not for the faint of heart.
It really isn't. You know, there are some cases that are just beyond your typical murder, right? I know a lot of people listen to us for the Lori Vallow case, and what happened to Tylee and JJ was beyond reprehensible. Tonight's case is Junko Furuta. She was a 17-year-old Japanese schoolgirl who was abducted, imprisoned, and held for 40 days and endured types of torture that people cannot even begin to fathom.
Isn't it said that she could have been held up to 44 days?
That is actually a very common misconception with this case. A book was written called 44 Days in Hell. A lot of American sources, for some reason, say that she was held for 44 days. She was actually held for 40 days.
I guess we're going to find out more about that, unfortunately.
So again, we've had the initial disclaimer. This is the secondary disclaimer of we will be talking in graphic detail about this case. A lot of other podcasts have covered it, and they've just kind of skimmed the surface. We feel like, not for sensationalist reasons, but because this case is so relevant, and it was actually in Japanese society almost swept under the rug, too.
Which is sad and weird because this actually changed laws, didn't it?
It did. It impacted Japanese culture, Japanese laws. So yeah, we are going to get into detail about what actually happened to Junko Furuta. So again, if you do not like hearing about graphic violence and gore, please cease and catch us back up on the next episode.
You have been warned.
Yes. So before we get into the case, let's talk about where you can find us. You can find us at www.wesawthedevil.com, Instagram at We Saw the Devil Podcast, and Facebook and Twitter, both at We Saw the Devil. So guess what time it is, Jackie?
What time is it?
Our countdown to the end of the world. We are getting close, guys.
Oh, God. Brace yourselves. Head to the hills. Stock up. Prep your children.
Bring your cows.
Ooh, cows.
Yeah. As of Saturday, July 18th, at the time of this recording, 8:30 Pacific Standard Time, it is 345,600 seconds, almost 6,000 minutes, 96 hours, 4 days until the end of the world, according to Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
Time is just ticking down.
Time is ticking down.
The doomsday clock ticks.
Are you guys doing anything special for it? I can't wait. I wish that I could be in the Idaho jail and see Lori when it happens.
I want to send her in like an anonymous letter to scare the crap out of her about the end of the world.
You know what I love? I love the fact that so many people, the Telmate system where people could call into the jail because of COVID, they've given the inmates the like touchscreens, iPad type of thing so people can call them on video chat. And she can't talk to Chad anymore that he's been arrested. All of these people on Reddit and Facebook and the various groups were calling Lori in jail, and she picked up. Like, she actually accepted some of their calls.
Aww.
And they had screenshots of her, and man, she's looking haggard.
Even murderers get lonely too.
Yeah.
If you want to have a hot date with Lori Vallow, let that sink in for a moment, okay? A hot date.
Yeah. So to celebrate the end of the world, our Patreon group is having a bit of a live stream party for this.
A live stream party, you say? What does that entail? I don't know, but it definitely entails the end of the world. That's what I know.
Right.
I was invited. I got RSVP'd immediately. One of our Patreons actually made it and is hilarious. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe we should do a Facebook Live or something of our little outdoor barbecue.
It's going to be fun, that is for sure. So check us out again if you have it on Patreon. We have a series of benefits. So we have tiers as low as $3 a month. And for that, you can get a series of goodies like ad-free episodes, shout-out stickers, postcards from the Mystery Case of the Month, where we pick a case from somewhere around the world. We send our patrons postcards. They don't know what case it is until they get it. And then they get to vote on what case it is they think that we are covering.
That Patreon-only episode's coming soon. And in probably the next week here.
And yeah, we have a Patreon-only Facebook group, as we state, and it is our new family. And everyone in it pretty much refers to one another as family. And it is an amazing, amazing environment. As always, if you would like to get in touch with us with a concern, complaint, compliment, or just additional information, you can reach out to us at info@wesawthedevil.com or go to our website again, wesawthedevil.com. Links to our Patreon, our YouTube channel, all of that stuff is readily available on our website. So let's go ahead and get into this evening's case. Junko Furuta's murder is also known as the concrete encased high school girl murder case.
That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, and you will learn why by the end of this episode. Junko Furuta was born on January 18th, 1971 in the Misato Saitama Prefecture, just north outside of Tokyo. Her nickname, Jackie?
Is Jun-chan?
She was 5'4". She weighed roughly 112 pounds before the incident occurred, and her body, when it was discovered, weighed just 77 pounds. She was immediately welcomed into the world by her two loving parents. Her father's name was Akira Furuta, and she had two brothers, and Junko was the middle child.
So that means she had an older brother and a younger brother.
Yes. She loved tennis. Apparently, she excelled at tennis. She played it while she was in junior high, and she attended the Yashio Minami High School. Now, very little is known about Junko, especially during her early childhood years, because her parents didn't do any interviews or often speak publicly after her death. What we do know is that she had just recently accepted a job at an electronics retail store while she was still in high school. So she planned on working there after her high school graduation. We know that she was beautiful, popular, intelligent, extremely ambitious, and she had the whole world in front of her. A common misconception in this case is that one of the boys involved in this case, one of the suspects, went to her school and had a crush on her. He asked her out and she turned him down. That is actually incorrect. So before we continue in the story, we would like to actually say that if you've heard that, that is actually almost an addition, an American addition for some reason.
Yeah, Hiroshi never went to school with her.
Hiroshi Miyana never went to school with Junko Furuta. So, they didn't know each other, none of that. Clearing that up, I'm sure possibly you have heard otherwise, but he did not attend her school, nor was he some spurned want-to-be lover. So, Junko had been working part-time as a supermarket manager locally because she was trying to save up money for graduation and a trip abroad that she had planned. Also, on the day of her abduction, she was said to have been looking forward to the final episode of a Japanese TV drama series called Tonbo. And isn't Tonbo about the Yakuza?
Yes, it is.
Which is just all too horrifically ironic. And that came, I believe, from one of her schoolmates. There are a lot of misconceptions in this case, so we would like to try to stay as factual as possible. So again, we don't know a lot about her mother. All we do know about her mother is that after discovering what had happened to Junko, she had severe mental health problems, and they worsened to the point where she needed inpatient psychiatric care. So what we do know is that Junko Furuta was 16 years old when she was abducted from her bicycle and then subjected to the most heinous, excruciating, and horrific forms of torture known to mankind for 40 whole days. On November 25th, 1988, sometime around 8:30 p.m., Junko Furuta was bicycling home from her part-time job as a supermarket clerk. She was trying to save money for a graduation trip that she had planned, and worked almost every day after school in order to save that money. Now, this particular day, she was looking forward to going home and watching the finale of her favorite TV show, a Japanese drama called Tonbo. Also that same evening, 18-year-old Hiroshi Miyano and 16-year-old Nobuharu Minato were riding their mopeds around the prefecture, looking for purses to snatch or women to rob and rape. It's important at this point to talk about these two guys and their friends. Hiroshi Miyano, 18 years old, came from an affluent family. It was very broken, though. He himself was known for being very aggressive. He had been in a motorcycle gang. He had been in and out of different high schools. And eventually, he ended up working as a junior member of the Yakuza in one of their fences. I believe it was an electronics store, like a fence for the Yakuza.
So he was in the early beginnings of trouble becoming a criminal adult.
Yes, exactly. Nobuharu Minato, his friend that he was with this particular evening, very wealthy family. His dad was a pharmacist and his mother was a nurse, and they worked in the same company, like the same pharmacy. They were never, ever, ever home. They worked constantly. Nobuharu, his older brother, was part of a street gang, and so a lot of the rooms in their house became kind of like the go-to spot for gang members. including junior Yakuza and overall just trash. And the way their house apparently was set up was their parents slept downstairs on the first floor, and Nobuharu and his brother had the entire upstairs to themselves. I mean, their house was just pretty much open for business constantly. A third person, their two friends who are also later involved, and so we're going to go ahead and go over them now. There's Joe Agura. His parents were divorced, but he showed no signs of trouble whatsoever. He dropped out of school to become an electrician's apprentice. And then finally, we have Yasushi Watanabe. And very little is known about him or his background. He is an accomplice in all of this. So just keep these four people, Hiroshi, Nobuharu, Joe, and Yasushi. All four people are accomplices and complicit in this act.
So how did it happen?
So that evening, again, around 8:30 p.m., Hiroshi and Nobuharu were cycling around the prefecture, and they spotted Junko cycling down the street. Miyano told Nobuharu to kick her off of her bicycle and then just leave the scene. So he did. And Junko tumbled down off of her bicycle, and Hiroshi immediately went over to help her, helping her up. Now, this was seen by multiple witnesses, this particular action. So Hiroshi told her that he had been threatened by the same guy with a knife and that she could still be in danger. So therefore, he convinced Junko to let him walk her home.
It sounds like a noble gesture, right?
Right. So under the pretense of walking her home, he ended up taking her to a nearby warehouse where he raped her. He threatened to kill her if she did not comply with all of his demands, and then told her, hey, I'm Yakuza. Which, if you are not familiar with Yakuza...
They're a brutal gang. More like mobster kind of gang of Japan.
Yeah, and it's a transnational crime organization. You may know them in particular for a lot of their colorful Japanese-style tattooing. A lot of them have just full body tattoos. But again, it's more or less like the Japanese mob, as Jackie said. And they have a lot of power.
They're feared. They're very feared.
Very feared. So no doubt when he said, I'm Yakuza, she was like, oh, I will do anything at this point. So from there, after the warehouse, he took her to a nearby hotel where he also raped her again. At this point, he called Nobuharu. They decided to meet in a local park later that evening. So around 12:30 a.m., Hiroshi brings Junko to the park and he meets up with his three other friends. And apparently there was a very short debate. What do we do with her? Hiroshi and Nobuharu had gang raped and kidnapped multiple other women before. However, they never imprisoned them. Well, this time they decide to take her to Nobuharu's house and actually imprison her because, hey, his parents aren't home. They're never there. And they threaten to kill Junko if she runs away, tries to run away, and they tell her that if she even makes an attempt, that they will send Yakuza to kill her entire family. Now, that is an extreme threat. So once at Nobuharu's house in the Ayasa district of Adachi, a suburb of Tokyo, she's repeatedly gang raped by all four boys. The next day, they force her to call her parents to tell them that everything is fine, that she had just run away because she was tired of her busy life. And she tells them that she's with a friend and that she's safe and that there's no need for them to call the police or go looking for her. And the night before, her parents had actually gone to the police, but the police themselves called off the investigation once that first phone call was made.
That's so sad.
So incredibly sad.
It's disappointing, really.
And at this point, the four boys had her imprisoned and entirely to themselves. Occasionally, Nobuharu's parents would come home from work, and he forced Junko to act like she was his girlfriend. And he basically threatened her with torture. Hey, if you don't act like my girlfriend, we will torture and beat you. And so she complied. She went along with it. And what she endured for the 40 days that she was held captive in this home
is like nothing I've ever seen.
It's completely unfathomable. So for the first week, Junko was repeatedly anally and vaginally gang raped by the four boys. She was forced to masturbate in front of them to turn them on, and then they would sexually assault her. It has also been reported that they brought in other friends and members of the Yakuza, but we could not find anything to substantiate that claim. There are a lot of sites that claim that this is true and that she was raped by over 100 men during her 48-day ordeal. There is one particular piece, it is in Japanese, that has been untranslated, where it is questionable that Hiroshi claims that he did in fact bring friends and family to this home to also sexually assault her. However, we do not have substantial evidence. Just know that if you research this case, you're going to see this claim. What we do know is that at roughly 3 weeks after her abduction, she managed to make it to the phone and attempted to call the police. And she was discovered doing this. She picked up the phone, she made the phone call, and right as it connected, she was discovered. And this is apparently what ignited a lot of the atrocities that they committed against her. Again, you may be asking yourself, she's at a house that has parents who live there. This time they know that she's the girlfriend. How did they not know? Apparently at this point, his parents did in fact realize that she had been abducted and was being tortured and held against her will.
Oh my God, that's so messed up.
She actually reportedly asked for their help one time, but they denied her and just walked away. And after the eventual trial for the guys, his parents expressed that they knew that the boys were attached to the Yakuza and they were too fearful of their own sons and their connection to the gangs to go to the police.
That's not even okay.
Nobuharu and the rest of his friends, once they realized that his parents were okay with it and they weren't going to go to the police, they completely dropped all of the false pretenses. I mean, just knowing that they had safety and, sanctuary there. And this is apparently when the sessions began. A few of the boys actually called Junko's torture, they called them sessions.
How twisted.
Isn't it horrific? 3 weeks into the ordeal, after she managed to make that initial phone call trying to call for help to the police, they immediately smashed her hands and feet with hammers and barbells and then set her body, especially her legs, on fire.
What did they use to set her legs on fire?
Lighter fluid.
Oh my God.
Abducting her, they immediately started starving her. They gave her no food. She sustained herself during her ordeal by drinking her own urine. She was forced to eat her own feces and even sustained herself by eating live cockroaches, whether they force-fed them to her or whether she managed to catch one to eat it.
I would imagine it's probably force-fed, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible.
A lot of the torture sessions began initially with the boys stringing her up from the ceiling with her hands above her head. They would beat her with closed fists, golf clubs, or other heavy metal or iron objects, and they treated her as a human punching bag. Quite literally what you would imagine. And occasionally they would hold her down on the ground, and one of their games was that they would drop dumbbells on her stomach, her hands, and her feet. They would then demand that she stand up and dance, sing, all while taking a beating as she did it. And mind you, she was also nude for all of this.
Oh, that's...
The entire time. She never had clothes on for 40 days.
Whoa.
Just mind you. After the initial pretenses of her being the girlfriend, they stripped her nude and held her captive in this room, and she never had clothes on. She was nude for all of this, which is just so horrific and terrifying for her. They repeatedly slammed her face against a concrete floor until she was completely unrecognizable. She was repeatedly burned with cigarettes. She had cigarette burns and scars all over her body, including her rectum, clitoris, and vagina.
Oh my God. Ugh.
Reminiscent of the Toolbox Killers and the Toolbox Murders, her left nipple had been ripped off with pliers.
Ooh.
And they had pierced her breasts with sewing needles. One of the big things that they did to her was they would insert things into her vagina or rectum. Scissors, a broken bottle, which apparently caused extreme internal injuries for her. Iron bars, broom handles, needles, and even fireworks.
Oh my God.
One of the sessions that the kids discussed, and we'll talk about this again later, unfortunately, is that they would actually set off fireworks all over various parts of her body. They would put one in her rectum and then set it off. On top of her belly. One time they set one off out of her mouth, but basically they would use fireworks frequently. Again, between these sessions, she was still being gang raped by these 4 boys.
Oh my God.
And it was reported that roughly after the 3 weeks to 4 weeks in mark, she just started constantly begging them to kill her, which that made me cry, actually, when I read that. Now, at this point, she lost the ability to walk because her feet were broken and her hands were broken. She could only just crawl. She couldn't even form sentences or fully speak at this point. And in court documents, one of the boys, Hiroshi, stated that one time it took Junko over 2 hours just to crawl down a short flight of stairs to relieve herself in the bathroom. When she managed to crawl down, again, she had internal organ damage, so she was having a horrible time urinating and defecating. She made a mess of herself in the bathroom, and so she was dragged back upstairs by her hair and beaten all over again. After roughly about a month in captivity, Junko had endured a lot of bodily trauma, as you can imagine.
I can't even imagine. To be honest, I can't imagine.
She had been beaten and tortured so badly that her internal organs were damaged and starting to shut down entirely. She could no longer hold water down most of the time, and she would immediately vomit it back up. Her nose was so broken and her nasal cavity so filled with blood that she could barely even breathe out of her mouth. And because she couldn't walk, her captors would force her to urinate into a cup and then make her drink it.
I can't.
By the end of December, again, she was kidnapped at the end of November. So by the end of December, they started making Junko sleep outside on the balcony in the snow. So with all of these extreme injuries, they made her sleep literally in the snow outside. Which, if this tells you about how much fear she was in, she was sleeping on a balcony out in the open as people were walking around underneath her on the street. And if you see pictures of his house, the house where this actually occurred at, it was in a very public place.
I wonder if she tried to cry for help, though.
She couldn't speak at this point.
Oh.
She couldn't stand. She couldn't move. She couldn't really do anything. And I can't imagine, again, they threatened to kill her parents, her friends, and her if she tried to escape. At this point, she was begging for death.
That's so inhumane. I can't.
The skin on her body, because she had been set on fire multiple times, the skin on her body was so severely infected that it was giving off a horrific smell and she had a raging infection. In court documents, one of the boys stated that they no longer found a use for her at this point. Once she started to smell from infection, that's when they lost interest.
Oh, that's great.
So on December 27th, Hiroshi, Nobuharu, and Joe left the house to abduct and gang rape a 19-year-old girl, which they do. They were successful in gang raping a random girl. They let her live and they fled the scene. And this is important here momentarily. So on January 4th, Hiroshi returned to the home after losing a considerable amount of money in a mahjong game. He immediately began to take out his anger on Junko, began to torture her. And of course, the other three guys joined in. They beat her with bars, dumbbells, and pretty much all of the other things that they had on hand. Because of the blood and pus that was covering her body, they taped plastic bags to their hands while they did this, so they would not get any of her fluid on them. They covered her face with hot wax and placed short lit candles on her eyes. And that particular torture session went on for over 2.5 hours.
I can't believe...
Apparently, previously, the torture was in shorter... Not like it makes it any better. It's so horrific. But apparently the previous torture was much shorter in length, and this one was much longer. It went on for over 2.5 hours, and it culminated with them dousing her entire body in lighter fluid and setting her on fire. She immediately went into a fit of seizures and convulsions, and then just went completely non-responsive. Junko Furuta had endured such unspeakable acts of violence and cruelty for 40 days, and she finally succumbed to those injuries and died, imprisoned and alone on January 4th.
That's so sad.
So incredibly sad. The next day, the gang was at a Yakuza-run florist, and they had left Nobuharu's house, and that's where she was, right? Don't forget that his brother also lived in the home, and he called Nobuharu to let him know that Junko had died. And Hiroshi Miyano worked at like a cement landscaping type of place at the time, and he borrowed a cement truck, and then the boys picked up a 55-gallon oil drum that was being used as a trash can in their neighborhood.
That's not even...
humane.
No, like a trash can. Are we kidding?
They wrapped her body in a few blankets and then put that inside of a large plastic bag. They put her into the drum, they tossed a few concrete blocks into the bottom, and then poured fresh concrete on top of it, and then they waited for it to harden. That night, they loaded the drum into the cement truck with the intention of driving to the coast and dumping the whole thing into the ocean. After realizing that it was a fairly long drive, they had a change of heart, while on the way, they passed a wide open space that was starting to get under development. So they ended up just abandoning the oil drum in the field. Now, on January 23rd, Hiroshi Miyano and Joe Ogura were arrested for that gang rape of that 19-year-old girl back in December while Junko was still imprisoned in their home, in Nobuharu's home. At this time, a mother and her young son had also been murdered in the same province, and no one had yet been arrested for it. So the detectives were suspicious and thought that Miyano and Ogura could potentially be the suspects in those murders. During an interrogation of Hiroshi Miyano, one of the detectives played a little bit of a psychological game. He said something to the effect of, at random, "You shouldn't kill people, right?" And Hiroshi took this as a sign that Joe had confessed to Junko's murder and immediately told the detective where the body could be located.
He's not very bright. That is very clear.
Yeah. He ended up confessing to everything. And very quickly, apparently, the 3 other boys did as well. Detectives went to the location and they found the drum and excavated Junko Furuta's body from the concrete. It was so badly decomposed that she had to be identified by fingerprints, because she'd been in that drum at that point for 2 months. So on April 1st, Nobuharu was arrested for a separate rape and assault, but quickly got rearrested for Junko's murder. Watanabe, that 4th suspect, and another man, a random man whose semen was also found at the scene, were also arrested. Junko Furuta's funeral was held on April 2nd, 1989. And she was buried with the work uniform that she would have worn to her new job.
That's the electronics retail store that she was going to work for, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And magically, her funeral was 1 day before her start date of her new job.
That's sad. Mm-hmm. She worked so hard.
This is, from a legal perspective, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So the identities of all 4 suspects of this case were kept secret, because they were all minors by Japanese law. And because of the heinous nature of the crimes, as well as, the entirety of Japan was outraged at this case. A Japanese newspaper felt like their identities should not be kept anonymous, and they were published.
Oh, so they went against the wishes of the Japanese government and published it anyway?
They did, because everyone was disgusted that this horrible, horrible, heinous case happened. A schoolgirl getting tortured, and then her name is plastered all over everything. And then you have the gossip mills, the rumor mills. Apparently, talking to a few Japanese friends that I have and doing some further research, people immediately blamed her parents without getting the full story. Now, remember, this is 1989 and there's no internet.
Oh, that's true.
And so they have to wait for news stories, television. And so apparently the rumor mill went crazy with us, and they blamed her parents for not caring enough about her to know where she was at 8:30 at night. The same bullshit victim blaming.
Well, they were definitely victims of what happened to her.
So the Japanese magazine Shukan Bunshin, they're the ones that published it. They broke tradition and anonymity and released all 4 names of the boys in their April 20th, 1989 issue. And what I found really interesting was an interview with its editor-in-chief at the time of the trial. His name was Hanada Kazuyoshi, and he gave the following reasoning. He said, "We used pseudonyms in our first article on the incident. However, while collecting information for the second article, I realized how awful this situation was. So I brought up that we should use their real names to the editorial department. To make a long story short, we decided that beasts don't deserve human rights."
That's right. I agree with that.
He continued to say that publishing the juveniles' real names presented a fairly difficult problem, but that they made an exception because it was a, quote, very terrible incident. He also stated that while he recognized that going public with the real names violated the juvenile law, he noted that there were no penalty regulations in place to punish them.
So they completely went against tradition.
Completely, which, as you know, in Japanese culture, tradition and values. Following the law is a value.
Well, honor is the value of Japanese tradition, like more traditional. And so they went against their own code of honor to do this. But because it was so horrific, it sounds like they went outside of that tradition.
Exactly. The trial started on July 31st of 1989. And the suspects, while they were in court, were known as A, B, C, and D.
That is shitty. I'm sorry. That's kind of crappy thing to do.
So a lot of people, after the fact, when you look up the story or you research it and see the court documents, the translated court documents, all you see is A, B, C, and D. They don't actually mention them by name in court. So Japan's law on juvenile crime, and this is still relevant to today, even, it favors rehabilitation and education of young criminals instead of punishment. It's actually very, very rare for juveniles to be tried in a district criminal court, which is mainly for adults. Most are tried in either the family court or the summary court, the very, very, very lowest adult court. Due to the heinous and depraved nature of this crime, the boys were tried in court as adults, but they were still given the same provisions reserved for juveniles. So they were tried in the big boy court, but they were given the same special provisions as reserved for kids, like name not published, anonymity, a lighter sentence.
Now I'm going to ask you the question that everyone's probably wondering. What is the cutoff age for juveniles?
20.
That's pretty high. Very different from the United States.
So, yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen in the United States 13-year-olds be tried as adults.
Oh, yeah.
So,
if it's horrific enough, yes.
Yeah. I call them boys because they were 18 and 16, but, in America, here, they'd be considered adults based on the heinousness and gravity of these crimes. Now, all 4 of them ended up pleading guilty to committing bodily injury that resulted in death rather than outright murder.
Are we kidding?
Mm-mm. And a lower court sentence. So now let's just go over the sentences. A lower court sentenced Hiroshi Miyano, the leader. They made him out in court to be the leader, the mastermind of all of this. They sentenced him to 17 to 20 years in prison. He appealed his sentence, but a Tokyo High Court judge sentenced him to an additional 3 years. So that 20-year sentence is basically the second highest sentence given in Japan before life in prison. So
he deserved life in prison.
His mother apparently sent Junko Furuta's parents 50 million yen, roughly about $425,000 after selling their home. And there are mixed reports on Junko's mother accepting the money or refusing it. Hiroshi Miyano was denied parole in 2004. And after getting out of prison in the summer of 2009, he was arrested and released numerous more times for various crimes, including fraud. He is currently free under a new name, and he is known for being back with the Yakuza. He is free, walking around, and he is a member of a damn gang. As we sit here speaking.
He doesn't deserve the light of day.
He has bought many expensive cars, and reportedly still to this day brags openly about killing, raping, and assaulting Junko and getting away with such a light sentence.
That's so twisted.
Nobuharu Minato, who originally received a 4 to 6 year sentence, was resentenced to 5 to 9 years. He was 16 at the time of the murder, and his parents and brother, however, were not charged in her death, even though they knew that she was imprisoned upstairs in their home, being tortured, raped, assaulted, and just awful.
What the hell?
No charges for them whatsoever. This itself here in particular caused so much outrage in Japan. Now, Junko's parents were appalled by the light sentences handed to these kids. They ended up suing Nobuharu Minato's parents in a civil lawsuit, and they won, rightfully so, an undisclosed sum of money in damages for that. Upon his release from prison, Nobuharu moved in with his mom, and while in prison, he had actually bulked up and learned the sport of Muay Thai.
Oh, that's exactly what he freaking needs.
Oh, it gets even better. He would go on to fight on the local circuit. And guess what his name was, Jackie?
God, what was it?
Concrete.
Oh, are we kidding?
Was what he publicly went by.
Oh, what a piece.
And apparently he had quite a little fan base, too.
Oh, no.
It's reported that he married a Romanian woman in 2006, and they ended up having a baby.
Why is he allowed to reproduce?
After they had the child and he started his family, they moved out of his mother's home. After that point, his address trail went cold and no one really had any information on him for many years. However, he recently resurfaced in the news 2 years ago. He changed his name to Shinji Minato. And last year, he was arrested for beating someone with a metal baton and then slitting their throat.
Are we surprised that he did something bad?
No, seriously. Who could have seen that coming?
What a failure of the justice system. What a failure.
All right, so let's move on to Yasushi Watanabe. Now, he was originally sentenced to 3 to 4 years in prison, and he received an upgraded sentence of 5 to 7. He was 17 at the time of the murder. He is the sole person who has not reoffended in this entire case.
How old was he when he offended originally?
17.
Okay.
So moving on to Joe Ogura. He served 8 years in a juvenile prison before he was released in August of 1999, and he also was 17 at the time of Junko's murder. Now, after his release, he changed his last name to Kamisaku and is said to have boasted about his role in the kidnapping, rape, and torture of Furuta as well. He is also a really big peach. In 2004, he was arrested for beating and threatening to kill a man he thought his girlfriend may have been cheating on him with. He beat the man for 4 whole hours, almost to the brink of death, and apparently he boasted about having killed Junko. He said that he had no problem killing her and he would have no problem killing him. Complete winner there.
That was kind of a waste of life and space. I don't like sharing my air with someone like that.
No. So he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for that attack on the man. And guess what?
What?
He's free and walking right now.
Of course.
He's walking around.
Because that's exactly where he belongs, right?
One of the most saddest, disgustingly vile things about this case is that his mother vandalized Furuta's grave.
What?
She said that she ruined her son's life.
Are we kidding?
And yes, you heard me correctly. Joe Kamasuku, also known as Ogura, this third in command of this entire horrible crime. His mother vandalized the victim's grave because she blamed the victim for ruining his life.
Are we kidding?
I've never wanted to slap someone so badly in my entire life.
Oh, no, slapping wouldn't even justify. I want to do more than slap. I'm not going to lie.
So, like, the boys are now 46, 47, 48, like in that, they're in their late 40s. So, depending on the ages of their parents, I may still get a chance here. But just so sick, so sick. Again, this case was controversial not only because of the gravity of the crime, but also because of the light sentences. Because all 4 of the suspects were 18 years old and younger, Japanese law, again, as we said, had a completely special set of provisions for their sentencing. 3 out of the 4 boys have reoffended with violent crimes. So it has led this entire spectacle in Japanese culture over and on top of what the Japanese newspaper said, his quote about how beasts shouldn't have human rights.
Yeah.
People took that all the way seriously. So it became this huge ordeal about children, rehabilitation versus punishment. And it was actually very controversial. During sentencing, the judge himself actually commented that, quote, exceptionally grave and atrocious violence had been inflicted upon the victim. He said that Junko Furuta had been, quote, murdered so brutally at the age of 17 that her soul must be wandering in torment.
See, and that plays in the Japanese culture too, and how they view the dead. And they have little homes, little cement homes on the side for the spirits to live in. Mm-hmm. And, the fear of spirits being tormented is very important to note here. I mean, that's sad. That's horrible.
Mm-hmm. No, it's just so heartbreaking. As for Junko Furuta's parents, they ended up divorcing, which is all too common in horrible cases like these. The parents usually end up getting a divorce, unfortunately, it seems. As her mother apparently had, again, a horrible mental breakdown. And it is known that she went in and out of psychiatric treatment for years after her death, but no one knows where she is today. No one knows. So this was one of the first big cases. Again, this is 1989. One of the first big cases that made people re-examine Japanese law and be like, should we kind of change something? These monsters deserve more. When they were released from jail and even them reoffending in jail, some of them were still violent in jail and were denied parole along the way. The Kobe child murders happened in 1997. And that's where a 14-year-old boy killed 2 younger boys. And that's actually the case that finally made the government lower the age of criminal responsibility from 16 to 14. Now, in 2014, the maximum number of years a minor 17 years or younger could be imprisoned was raised from 15 to 20. However, there is a sneaky little clause in the juvenile law that states that if a minor commits a crime that is punishable as a capital offense in a criminal court, that minor should receive life imprisonment rather than the death penalty.
So similar to our modern day laws as well.
Mm-hmm. It's, a lot of people believe that her killer should have received the death penalty.
I'm not really for the death penalty, but in this case, it's really hard not to side with that.
And what's really interesting, too, is that when 3 out of the 4 men reoffended as adults out of prison after they served their prison time for this particular case, not a single newspaper actually attached them to the Junko Furuta case.
What?
Nope. Bloggers online made the, connection of point A to point B, and they went haywire over it. National newspapers and television and stuff, they didn't say, hey, this guy changed his name to Shinji, and hey, he helped brutally assault, gang rape, and imprison this girl, a heinous crime. They didn't actually attach them. Almost like they were still trying to sweep it under the rug. You know what I mean?
Sick.
So as far as pop culture, all cases have some pop culture aspects. There have been a handful of books, at least 3. Per Wikipedia, at least that part, at least 3 books have been written about the crime. I have not purchased or read a book on this case. I don't think my heart could take it. There have been a couple exploitation films made about this.
That's so messed up. Like, there should not be any exploitation films.
No.
That is not honoring her memory at all.
I am a huge connoisseur. I love exploitation films. However, I think that true crime should be off limits for that kind of stuff.
I've actually, as I get older, the less and less I like exploitation films at all, or any films like that, because it always comes from this one place. And
well, also, the exploitation film came out in 1995.
Are we?
So literally 6 years after it happened, which is so disgusting, in my opinion.
Whoever made that should be...
And then there was an actual larger film called Concrete that came out in 2004.
Are we kidding?
And the grossest part to me is that there's a manga called, I don't know the exact Japanese name for it, but it translates to 17 Sai. And it is based on Junko Furuta.
Yeah, and they make her out to be a normalized character in it, and then she's kind of slutty.
And it's literally, the plot is Junko Furuta, a group of gang members led by Miyamoto, capture Sashiko Ozawa. So they change the names. After assaulting her at a hotel, they confine her in a house where they commit acts of rape and torture. So freaking gross. So they actually made a manga series out of this poor girl's life.
And not even life. It shouldn't even be her end of life. This is out of an incident, out of an event that should have never happened, never take place. And that was so horrific that people shouldn't be willing to just nonchalantly make these really happy, like, drawings and sexualizing her. No. And then exploitation. Are we kidding? So then we talk about Japanese culture, right? I'll tell you that, growing up, I watched anime and stuff like that. And okay, normal to like Sailor Moon and stuff, but I don't like it when they depict women as being so sexually like exploited, and children. And there's an origin story behind a lot of manga and anime when it comes to how they exploit little girls and stuff. I don't know, man. It's just never a time and place for this. Never. It's
actually just really, really vile.
They should be raked over the coals for even making that.
No, they absolutely should. It is absolutely, absolutely vile. And yeah, there was an entire series about it.
I want to thank everyone for sticking around to listen to her story.
And I feel like telling her story, yes, thank you very much for sticking around. I feel like telling her story, sordid, graphic details and all, is just so important, because I think it gives us a lot to think about as a society as a whole with how our justice system works. That is pretty interesting that 3 out of the 4 boys involved in this ended up reoffending as adults, and like at least 2 out of the 4 are in a gang, in the mob. So it's so heinously sad. But this case is one of the most requested of us to cover, so we decided to go ahead and put this out. I've been aware of this case. I found it a couple years ago, actually, on Reddit, and it ruined me. It absolutely ruined me. I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet. I was a curious soul on the internet.
Me too, yeah.
And I've witnessed a lot, terrorist beheading videos, the whole bit. Just merely reading what happened to Junko Furuta ruined me. It pretty much took away my entire faith in humanity. And just it really drills home that there are monsters in this world, and they can be 16-year-old boys.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, monsters can start at any age, to be honest with you. I want to give a benefit of a doubt to a young boy who, starts picking up dead animals on the side of the road, but it's just, sometimes you just can't. You can't chance it, and you need to let justice actually take place. Look, I have a very strong stomach, and I'm not very sensitive in a lot of ways, and this made me really cringe. It really, just hearing it just literally twists me in wrong ways.
It's absolutely terrible. So that's it. If you have any questions, again, you can email us at info@wesawthedevil.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at WeSawTheDevil, website WeSawTheDevil.com, and Instagram as We Saw the Devil Podcast. Again, we are approaching the end of the world. Feel free to check out our Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/WeSawTheDevil. So again, thank you so much for listening and sticking with us. We want to hear from you and what you want us to cover next that's not Lori Vallow related as well, although we will still keep bringing Lori Vallow news to you.
We have another episode coming soon.
We do, with an update on that case. So that's it for this week, guys.
Until next crime.